The rushing, muddy waters of the Mara River surged around David Thompson's chest as he fought the powerful current. A drowning lion cub clung desperately to his shoulders. Just minutes before, the 34-year-old wildlife photographer had been preparing his equipment on the riverbank when he witnessed something that would forever alter his life. A tiny cub, no older than 4 months, tumbled into the swollen river, swept away by floodwaters that had risen overnight from heavy rains upstream. For 8 years, David had documented wildlife in Kenya's Masai Mara, never breaking the cardinal rule of nature photography: never interfere with natural processes. Until now. The cub had been playing too close to the water's edge when the soft earth crumbled beneath his paws. His terrified squeals as the current dragged him downstream pierced David's professional detachment. Without hesitation, David dropped his camera and plunged into the dangerous river. "I couldn't just watch him drown," he would later explain. "Every instinct I had as a human being overrode my training." The rescue almost cost David his life. The Mara River in flood season is treacherous, filled with hidden debris and unpredictable currents that have claimed countless lives over the years. As David fought toward the struggling cub, a submerged log struck his left shoulder, nearly knocking him unconscious. Only his determination to save the young lion kept him focused as he finally managed to grab the exhausted animal. Weak from swallowing water and panicked from the trauma, the cub immediately wrapped his small paws around David's neck, holding on with surprising strength. David could feel the animal's tiny heart beating rapidly against his chest as he began the dangerous journey back to shore, fighting a current determined to drag them both toward the crocodile-infested pools downstream. What David didn't realize as he struggled was that he was being watched. On the riverbank, hidden among acacia trees, 5 adult lionesses had been tracking the sound of their missing cub's distress calls. The pride had been searching frantically, following his scent to the river's edge just in time to witness David's rescue attempt. As David finally reached the shallower water near the bank, exhausted and gasping, he looked up to see a sight that froze his blood. The entire pride was there, not just the 5 lionesses, but also a massive male lion with a dark mane, all standing motionless in a semicircle around the water's edge. Their amber eyes were fixed on him and the cub he carried. David's mind raced, but he quickly realized he had no options. Trapped in chest-deep water, holding a lion cub with 6 full-grown lions blocking his path to safety, any sudden movement could trigger a fatal attack. The largest lioness, clearly the matriarch, took a step closer. David held his breath, expecting the worst. Lions are fiercely protective. Here he was, a human stranger holding one of their cubs. Everything he knew about lion behavior told him this would end in tragedy. But something extraordinary was about to happen, something that would challenge everything scientists understood about lion cognition. The matriarch's eyes held no aggression or threat. Instead, David detected something he had never seen in a wild predator's gaze during his 8 years of photography: recognition and what appeared to be gratitude. The cub in David's arms began mewing softly, calling to his pride. The sound broke the tense standoff. What followed was captured on David's waterproof action camera, which had been recording automatically. The matriarch stepped into the shallow water, her massive paws creating ripples as she moved closer. David's every muscle tensed for an attack that never came. Instead, she stopped just 3 feet away and did something that defied every law of predator behavior David had studied. She lowered her head in what could only be described as a bow. The gesture lasted several seconds while the other pride members remained completely still, as if witnessing a ceremony of profound significance. When the matriarch raised her head, she made direct eye contact with David, not a predator's assessing stare, but the steady gaze of acknowledgement between equals. The cub grew more active, reaching for his mother with tiny paws while making soft chirps. The matriarch responded with gentle chuffing vocalizations, the same sounds lionesses use with their cubs. "It's okay, little one," David whispered, his voice barely audible over the rushing water. "Your family is here." As if responding, the matriarch took another careful step closer. David's heart hammered, but something in her demeanor told him he wasn't in danger. Her approach was deliberate and completely non-threatening. What happened next would be analyzed by animal behaviorists worldwide for years. The matriarch gently extended her massive head toward David, close enough that he could feel her warm breath. For several moments she studied him, her intelligent amber eyes seeming to assess not just his physical presence but something deeper, his intentions, his character, his role in saving her cub. Then she did something unprecedented in recorded lion behavior. The matriarch began to groom David. Her rough tongue made contact with his forehead, the same nurturing behavior shown to pride members. The gesture was unmistakable. She was accepting him, temporarily, as part of her family. David remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe, as this apex predator showed him a level of trust that contradicted everything he thought he knew. The grooming lasted only 30 seconds, but the message was clear to every pride member: David was not a threat. He was the human who had risked his life to save one of their own. The other lionesses moved closer, their body language relaxed. The massive male lion, who had maintained watchful distance, padded to the water's edge and lowered himself into a resting position, a clear signal he considered the situation peaceful. David carefully began moving toward shore, still carrying the cub. The pride parted to create a clear path, their behavior more reminiscent of an honor guard than predators surrounding prey. On the muddy bank, David slowly knelt and placed the cub on solid ground. The reunion was immediate and emotional. The matriarch rushed to her offspring, nuzzling him thoroughly, checking for injuries and purring with relief. The other lionesses gathered, each taking turns to sniff and examine the rescued cub. The male lion approached last, his massive head lowering to gently touch the youngster with his nose. David remained kneeling, water dripping from his clothes, watching this intimate family moment unfold. He should have been terrified, surrounded by 6 of Africa's most dangerous predators. Instead, he felt honored to witness something few humans ever see, the genuine emotional bonds within a lion pride. Dr. Sarah Mbeki, a wildlife biologist who later reviewed the footage, was stunned. The grooming behavior exhibited by the matriarch is typically reserved for pride members, she explained. For a wild lioness to extend this to a human suggests a level of cognitive recognition and gratitude that challenges our fundamental understanding of feline social intelligence. As the pride settled around their cub, David began slowly backing away, hoping to give them space. But the lions had other plans. As David retreated, the matriarch looked up and made a sound he had never heard in 8 years of documenting African wildlife, not a roar or growl, but a gentle rumbling call that seemed almost conversational. The other pride members immediately responded, rising and positioning themselves in a formation that took David's breath away. The lions arranged themselves in 2 parallel lines, creating a clear pathway from where David stood to the acacia tree where his equipment waited. It was an escort formation, an honor guard protecting his safe passage. "Impossible," David whispered, his voice caught by his still-recording microphone. "They're seeing me safely out." The matriarch took the lead position on David's right while the massive male moved to his left. The 4 other lionesses flanked them, maintaining perfect spacing as they began a slow ceremonial walk from the riverbank. David found himself in the center of this extraordinary procession, surrounded by over 1,500 pounds of apex predators treating him like an honored guest. The rescued cub, now recovered enough to walk, trotted alongside his mother, occasionally looking up at David with curiosity. Every few steps, the youngster would brush against David's leg, a gesture of familiarity that left him speechless. At his equipment, the pride halted. The matriarch approached David one final time, her massive head tilting slightly as she studied his face. Then, in a gesture that would be replayed millions of times, she gently pressed her forehead against his, the same greeting behavior lions use with trusted pride members. "Thank you," David whispered. "Thank you for trusting me." The matriarch stepped back and released a soft chuff of contentment and farewell. One by one, each pride member approached David, briefly touching him with their noses or rubbing against his legs. Even the massive male lion participated, gently bumping David's shoulder with his enormous head. The rescued cub was last. The youngster sat directly before David, tilted his tiny head upward, and released a small mew that sounded remarkably like a thank you. David reached down and gently stroked the cub's head one final time, both seeming to understand this moment would never be repeated. As the pride moved away toward distant shade for their afternoon rest, David stood alone by his equipment, soaking wet and emotionally overwhelmed. His camera had captured every second. The footage would later be authenticated by experts, analyzed by behaviorists, and featured in documentaries worldwide. Dr. Jane Goodall herself would call it one of the most remarkable displays of interspecies communication and gratitude ever recorded. But for David, analysis mattered less than the profound truth he experienced firsthand. In that muddy river, surrounded by wild lions who should have seen him as a threat, he witnessed something science is only beginning to understand: the capacity for genuine gratitude and recognition across species barriers. The rescued cub grew to adulthood under his pride's protection, and David continued his photography in the Masai Mara. Over following months, he encountered the same pride several times. Each time, the matriarch acknowledged him with a gentle chuff, and the now-grown lion he had saved would approach his vehicle without fear, sometimes resting in its shade. Local Maasai guides began calling David Simba's brother, the man briefly adopted into a lion pride. Tourism operators offered David Thompson tours, though none ever replicated the extraordinary trust he experienced. Dr. Mbeki established the Thompson Mara Research Foundation to study the cognitive and emotional capabilities demonstrated during the rescue. David's experience proves the boundaries between human and animal consciousness are far more fluid than we imagined, she wrote. What we witnessed wasn't just animal behavior. It was a demonstration of values we consider uniquely human: gratitude, honor, and the recognition of moral debt. For David Thompson, who started that day simply hoping to photograph wildlife, the encounter became a life-changing reminder that compassion is a universal language, spoken and understood by creatures we're only beginning to truly know.